You're listening to MicrasCast, the podcast about all things Micras.
Well, that's really nerdy.
Nerdy or not, here we go. This is MicrasCast with your host, Ed. Intellectual, stimulating conversation.
Hello and welcome to MicrasCast and to a very special episode. Already I know what you're thinking. That's not the sexy Puerto Rican voice that I'm accustomed to hosting this show. Well, you'd be right. My name's Barnaby and I'm stepping in for Ed to host a special FMF-themed edition of MicrasCast. Today we'll be previewing the various FMF regional competitions that will be taking place this summer: the Copa Apollonia, the CiboTap Championships, the EMU Championships, and the Benacia Cup. I'm also joined by an august panel of special guests, including the FMF President, Craitman.
Hello.
We're also joined by the Vice President, Joe Foxon.
Vice, hello.
And I guess we couldn't keep him away, Mr. Edgard Carrillo. Welcome.
Woohoo! Hello.
How does it feel to be a guest?
It feels nice. I can get used to this.
Less effort. Okay. And the reason, of course, we'll start off with the Copa Apollonia as the first tournament. Of course, 4 FMF tournaments to dissect. And this is going to sort of be a bit of a preview show, sort of like you'll get the British listeners may be familiar with Talk Sports. That's kind of the theme I'm going down here. I am Alan Brazil of Micras. Actually, it's probably not the best comparison, is it? But okay, but we'll start off with the 2020 Copa Apollonia Championships. And this edition is being held in La Mancha, which is obviously a territory of Senia. So the tournament will be playing across 6 venues in La Mancha, and there will be 12 teams taking part. This is up from the 8 that we usually see for these sort of tournaments. And we'll start off, I guess we'll take it group by group and see how we go from there. And we'll briefly talk about each of the teams in the groups, and then we'll sort of discuss a bit more in depth about the tournament as a whole after we sort of go through the groups. Group A in the Copa Apollonia consisted of La Mancha, the Florian Republic, and CiboTap. And I just sort of wondered from you guys, what do you think about that group? Sort of, I think people may look at that and go, Floria to win, La Mancha second, CiboTap third. What are your sort of views on that group?
Well, La Mancha football has sort of been on quite a spike lately, hasn't it? They sort of started off as underdogs as Fort Colgrad, and they were always whipping boys for a few years. But yeah, they had a pretty decent Copa Apollonia 2 years ago, reaching semi-finals, and they reached their first World Cup last year, which is quite a rise for them. So I think they could challenge the Florians in this group. I mean, there's 2 teams to go through. Those are definitely the 2 I'd expect to go through, but maybe not necessarily with the Florian Republic in first place.
Yeah, I think I would generally expect the Florian Republic to come first, but with the sort of focus in Florian sport sort of switching every 10 minutes, they may not be quite so confident, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, sorry.
Yeah, I sort of trailed off there. I don't know what I was going to finish with.
Yeah. I have to say, from my own sort of experience with the La Mancha team, like it sort of started off being a sort of thing on the sides, and it's really grown. And Lynn did really well this year in the Senior League. They finished 3rd, and insider knowledge, they may do a little bit better next season with some of the signings they have lined up. But at the minute, they've got a domestic club which is progressing really nicely. Some of the smaller clubs are also starting to rise through the divisions, and they're evolving into a nice side that's sort of below the sort of layer of teams that you'd expect to be challenging for trophies in Apollonia, but certainly still a very competitive side. Do you think that it's realistic for them to beat the Florians?
I mean, anything can happen in a tournament finals, really, can't it? I mean, we've got to look at Telia in the World Cup last year, getting knocked out, and as holders, getting knocked out in the group stage. I mean, you could easily see La Mancha beating the Florians, beating CiboTap, topping the group. Yeah, definitely.
Well, of course, it's the opening game of the whole tournament as well, so anything can happen. Get a draw there and beat CiboTap by more, or even win 2-1 when the Florians win 1-0, and they're suddenly top of the group, and they're not playing Algeria in the next round, which I'm sure we'll come to in a minute. But
yes. Just before we move on to the groups, I did want to say a word about CiboTap. A bit of a surprise qualifier. When I looked at the qualifying groups ahead of the sort of qualifying competition, I did not think that they would come anywhere near close to qualifying, but just pipped Arboria by a single goal to qualify. I mean, they have to be looking at this and thinking we are just lucky to be here rather than sort of any sort of progressing. But do you think they could pull off a shock result?
Well, they were fifth in their qualifying group with about 2 games to go, and they just looked completely out of it. But yeah, results sort of fell their way, and like you say, one goal difference was all that got them there. I think they are a little bit lucky to be there, I'll be honest. Can't really see them. I could maybe see them drawing against one of the teams, but I can't see them getting a result out of both, at least not enough to put them through into the knockout stages now.
Well, it wasn't even 1 goal difference. It was a goal scored that was that kept them in second place. It was the 4-1 against Korea instead of losing 4-0 that put them through, I think.
Yes, I think they did luck themselves into qualifying. We'll move on to Group B. Algeria, Qingdao, and Latvia in this one. We'll speak from Edgard because it's your nation. It's Algeria's first venture into competitive sport, I guess, football at least anyway. As someone who's perhaps not into the whole FMF scene as some of the people who are here and maybe listening, what do you make of it? Are you excited? Do you think that Algeria could do well?
I am always excited when one of my projects seems to be doing well in sports. I don't always pay attention to what's going on, except whenever someone tags me in something that's going on in the Discord, and then I'm like, oh, my team is doing good. But, that's always great and that's always fun. And even if we lose, I just always have a good time being part of something that everyone else is involved in too. But I'm excited, and I am always going to be cheering for my Algerian team. Go Suns!
You've got 2 Suns in the same group. You've got Qingdao as well.
Yeah, that's right.
You have to be more specific.
Yeah, the Sons of Era.
I think this group is the hardest to call out of all of it because it's out of the whole tournament. This one could end up with everyone on 3 points.
Yeah.
I'd agree. Yeah, I'd agree with that assessment. Yeah, I think it's tough. The only qualm I would have with it is they haven't been in a tournament since the 2017 World Cup.
Oh wow, that's been a while.
They failed to qualify for the last Copa Apollonia. They failed to qualify for the last World Cup. They almost messed it up against Alrig. They had, I think, with 3 games to go in qualifying, they were 9 points clear of Alrig, and it still came down to the final day. So they seem to be a team that can't quite get the job done. And I think against Qingdao and Algeria, that could come back to bite them.
Yeah, and they played Algeria in the qualifiers, didn't they? And lost both times. So that could easily play on them as well. And yeah, like you said, they haven't been in a tournament since 2017. They've lost quite a few important players. Aki Mayampa has retired, who has been like Latvia and Hermu's sort of record goal scorer over the past decade or more. So he'll be a big loss for them going into this when they probably want goals,
Exactly. And I think if you look at those 3 teams, I would say Algeria are the ones that you think have got the goals in them. And I think Qingdao are quite defensively well organised, but I don't know where the quality is going to come with Latvia. I just can't see them getting through, I'm afraid. And I think they're a good team, but they just don't have that it factor that perhaps some of the other teams in this tournament do have.
Well, possibly not, but I suppose it's this is the main event now. That I think as they were maybe cruising for so long, and they thought they were over the line when they actually weren't. Maybe just something was off the gas a little bit. Maybe they can step on it a little bit more now.
I think there is always the possibility that sort of getting into a major tournament will sort of get them focused again. But I don't know. I'm just not convinced by them.
Possibly not. No, just saying. I feel like there's probably something else in the tank that they haven't showed us yet.
Yeah, they've played in 2 World Cups and got out of the group stage both times in 5-team group. So they seem to know what to do when it gets to this stage. But yeah.
There are question marks. Okay, we'll go on to Group C. This has got Kingdom of Korea, Krasnoyarsk, and Los Liberados. So we've got a team leaving Micras, and we've got 2 of the Krasnokorian nations. Again, we'll talk a bit more after the groups about who's got a chance to win it. But Korea have been really developing nicely over the last couple of years. Nikola's put a lot of good work into that team. You would expect them to win this group as well. But Krasnoyarsk are a very tough team, and Los Liberados, did really well in the qualifying. So it could be a bit more tricky than it first appears.
Yeah, I mean, Krasnoyarsk got to the quarterfinals of the World Cup at the first attempt last year. They actually lost to Korea, didn't they, in that quarterfinal? And they had a decent little extra time win over Natopia, which I actually rewatched the broadcast of the other day because I was like, I thought I'll just watch a random game. And that's what I picked. But yeah, I think they've got a definite good chance of doing well here, especially as the I think they won the Krasnokorian Cup whenever that was. Was that start of the year or last year? So they have beaten Korea and topped a group relatively recently, which could definitely come into their favour here. But yeah, Korea probably are the favourites here with development that they've gone through recently, and obviously, semi-finals of the World Cup and the Confederations Cup in quick succession.
Yeah, I think I am expecting Korea to do quite big things in this competition. But I suppose it just depends how they get against Krasnoyarsk. That's the opening game for them as well. So that's going to be a bit of a bellwether for the whole tournament, I think. How they do there
Exactly.
will give us an idea of how the whole thing's going to go.
Yeah, I think that game could really sort of decide the tournament almost, because if Korea get off to a good start, if that's a 2-3-0 win, which is not out of the realms of possibility, that could give Korea some serious momentum going into the rest of the tournament. But if they struggle in it, if they drop points, if they could lose it, I mean, the runner-up of that group, in all likelihood, will play Senya in the quarterfinals. So it's especially important to win that game for those two teams.
Yeah, and I don't think Los Liberados will really challenge here, mostly because they haven't got a future. That tends to see a dip in form for a team when that happens to them.
Yes, absolutely. And the final group in the Copa Apollonia that we'll talk about, Group D, we've got Milot, Senya in there, also Freeland and Rasper. I'll talk a bit more about Senya, but the other two teams, Rasper, unlucky to miss out in the last few tournaments, I think. The qualifying groups, they were sort of one of those teams where not good enough to qualify, but sort of just edging their way up a little bit, I guess. And they finally crossed over the line to actually qualify. And then you also have Freeland, who failed to make the last Copa Apollonia, but played at the last World Cup, got to the knockout rounds of that. What do you think about those two teams? Do they have a chance to go forwards in this competition?
Well, certainly at least one of them does, because two teams get through. But
thanks, Captain Obvious.
They may have to play either a very good Korean side or a very good Krasnodar, whatever Krasnodar's adjective is, that team. And that's going to be the tricky part, is what happens in the quarterfinals. That the group stage, well, I don't think anyone is expecting them to beat Senya, but you never know. Stranger things have happened.
Yes. I have to say, when the draw was made from a Senyan point of view, my first reaction was, okay, we've avoided the Florians, who I think were in pot 2 as well. But there's always a thing with Freeland. I'm not sure, they're not at the level that the Koreans and the Florians are, but there's always something with them that you think they're just around the corner from a big result where they beat one of the big teams. I don't think they're the kind of team who could do that on a regular basis, but in a one-off match, that's
a Copa Apollonia group, yeah.
Yes. And it only takes a shock result for Senya to suddenly be playing Korea in a quarterfinal, which would be pretty big disaster for us, I think. So
yeah, I mean, Freeland did quite well in the World Cup, like you said. It was their debut tournament, and to get out of their group, I mean, it wasn't a tricky group, but there was quite a few teams that were very evenly matched. So I mean, you had like Zanderijn in there, who would be like World Cup quarterfinalists. We mentioned Krasnodarsk, Nuva Dudes were in there too, and they're teams that are, like you say, could easily beat one of the big teams on their day, but probably aren't going to do it regularly. So it was a tough group to get out of. So you give them some kudos for getting through there, and hopefully they can build that momentum here.
If I recall correctly, they drew with Krasnodarsk 1-1 in the last World Cup. So a very difficult, a very tricky team to beat, I reckon. We'll sort of, because I think that if I'm going to discuss Senya, it should be broadly within the context of teams who can win the tournament, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I think it's reasonable.
They've won the last two, so I think it's reasonable, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So as Joe was saying, speak more broadly in terms of teams who can win it and sort of the permutations of the knockout rounds now. Senya go into it 2 times reigning champions, reigning world champions, but, and this is something that I have a frustration with the Copa Apollonia, something always seems to go wrong for us in the group stage. Every single group stage, there's something major that goes wrong for Senya. And I cast my mind back to the last Copa Apollonia. I think we had Jingdao and was it Stormark as well in our group? Jingdao and Stormark, I think. And they were our first 2 games. And I thought, okay, that's an easy 6 points for us. And we only had 1 point after those 2 games. And that meant that we had to beat Garinia to get through. Thankfully, we did, but there always seems to be a problem with us in the Copa Apollonia. And my fear is I don't see that happening in the group stage, but with some of the other teams now coming into play, I look at Korea and I look at Floria and I'm thinking they have the potential to beat us and to dethrone us from this championship. Do you think that Senya have what it takes to get a third title here?
I would probably look at it the other way around, and I would question whether anyone else has what it takes to knock them off.
Yeah, I mean, Senya's like the benchmark at the moment, isn't it? So like, someone needs to challenge you as opposed to you giving it away. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that there won't be any green ribbons on the trophy, but there's a lot of good teams. There's maybe 5 or 6 teams this time could actually have like a reasonable shot at winning it, or at least doing well. Getting to maybe the final, or it's really hard to say. I wouldn't put my house on it anyway. Let's put it that way.
Yes. Well, I think Northcliffe United, one of the Florian sides, won the Champions League this year. They did it on penalties. But you look at that, you look at the group list of teams, you think Floria could do it, Coria could do it, Algeria could do it. There are 4 teams that I think have a reasonable shot of winning this tournament. And as much as I think Senya are the team who are out ahead of the pack, so to speak, I don't think that we are much better than those other teams. I think it is quite close. It is a very even tournament.
Well, all 4 of the teams that you mentioned there are ranked in the top 10, aren't they? So they're all teams to be taken seriously. Even if the wind was blowing a different way, it can completely change who wins. It's that close, I think, between the teams. Even with Senya that have been so good over the years.
Yes.
One wrong bounce of the ball and suddenly they're out in the semi-finals and someone else is in the final.
Exactly. And I said those 4 teams, but as well, you look at those groups, there are teams that could surprise them, could make each other finish second rather than first. It's really tough to call the knockout rounds of this tournament, and you just think that it could be anything. Anything could come out of it. I would be surprised if the title didn't go to one of those 4 teams. I think, if we were to sit here in a month's time and go, okay, wow, La Mancha have won the tournament, or Qingdao or Krasnarus have picked up the Copa Apollonia, I think that would be a massive surprise. But I don't think it's out of the window of possibilities for us to be saying, Coria have won it for the first time, or Algeria have won it. It's very, very tight. And as you say, it's like one mistake could really win a team or cost a team this tournament.
A very thin line between who's where, I think. And that's going to be the difference, is just how thin is the line? Can you break it?
Definitely. And I'll talk, I guess the last bit that I want to bring up about the Copa Apollonia is one thing that I think has been really interesting about Micrasian football over the last couple of years. I guess it kind of started with me, although I know the Italians were first to it, is sort of how much the supporter culture has been grown as part of Apollonian football. And a lot of times we think about Micrasian football and we think, okay, it's the simulations, it's that kind of aspect to it. But myself, and I know Edwin writes a lot about this, and also Nicola and Jakub writing about the supporter aspect of it. I guess in a tongue-in-cheek sort of preview, we could ask, do you think there could be any flare-ups? But what are you guys thinking more generally about sort of people focusing on footballing development through sort of writing about supporter culture or other avenues than just, I guess, teams and simming results?
I think it's always good to have a variety of ways people can get involved. Just the pure sort of numbers and results of everything can a lot of people off who aren't massively into that. So if there's another avenue that someone can approach to be part of the sport, if they want to be involved in it but don't really care about it, then it's that kind of thing. I mean, there's plenty of people who like writing about rec wars and conflicts and stuff. You can easily tone that down and put some supporters' names onto it rather than military terms, and easily work in a very similar sort of story to hold your interest if you really want it.
Yeah, I think anything that adds as much depth as this does without requiring too much maintenance is always a positive thing.
Even if you don't let our fans into your stadiums.
Oh, we let the fans in.
Yeah, it's not the flesh.
They come as one in Senya. I'm sorry.
Born with a flare in his hand.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to ask Edgard, have you thought about sort of what kind of supporters Algeria has?
Man, I haven't given it too much thought, but now this conversation has kind of prompted me to give that some thought and see what an Aldurian ultra scene would look like. I mean, I would say it would be very chaotic, very loud, lots of people yelling, and that's all I have right now. I'll have to think about it and just kind of see what will be the new vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say South American.
Yeah.
That would be cool to get some Argentinian or Brazilian themed football culture.
Yeah.
We've missed a bit of that with Guarani going, haven't we? They very much had that feel to them. So yeah, it would be good to to bring that back to Micros.
Oh, yeah. I miss Garania or Garenia, however
Yes.
it is that you pronounce it.
Yeah.
I miss beating them up at football matches.
Not on the pitch, though.
Does anyone know Gerald outside of Micros? Like, is he doing okay? Is he doing well? Does anyone know?
I have him on Facebook, but he doesn't seem to post much, unfortunately. But I spoke to him. I spoke to him about a couple of months ago. He seems to be doing all right. Yeah. I think now we'll go on to the CiboTap Championships. We can keep this one kind of brief because, yeah. I mean, let's get real. 3 teams aren't going to be here after the moment this tournament ends. Bergischer and Helderborough are gone, and North Antarctica are relocating. As are
Kavak.
Yeah. Close enough.
Yes. QQQ. But I'll come to you first about them, Joe. You know, QQQ, if they're qualifying for a tournament, that's got to say a lot about perhaps the quality of the CiboTap at the moment.
Well, they kind of ended up in a bit of a fortunate group. You know, the Athlon have qualified before, but they've never really gone very far. I don't think Two Martyrs have done anything really at all since they came along. And then Natopia, well, they were sort of hopeless against them both times. So that sort of went as expected. They picked up the points they needed to pick up. All they had to do was come second. They had the playoff then against Angun, wasn't it? Which again, they scraped through. It was away goals. So I don't think they haven't played the standard of teams they're now going to be up against in the main tournament. And I would not be surprised I certainly wouldn't be surprised if they finished last in the group. I think there may be some fairly heavy scorelines, maybe about as long as their name in terms of the score sheet.
Well, they did lose 4-0 in the qualifiers against Natopia, so maybe that might be a mark of scoreline. I mean, sorry, you go.
I was just to say, once again, 2 teams that faced each other in qualifying are in the same group in the main tournament.
It's becoming a bit of a common theme, actually.
It does happen a lot.
Yes. But you look at that group, I think Zandarine and Natopia will be favourites for this tournament, I think. And Zandarine, I looked at their squad, actually. They've got some young players for once. Not everyone's in their 30s anymore. How do you evaluate their chances, Craitman?
I sort of neglect Zandarine a lot with all my other I'm in charge of and having to oversee. They just get forgotten about. I did mention earlier they've been to like a quarterfinals of a World Cup, but that was probably over a decade ago now, and they've won a CiboTap before. I don't even know how to pronounce that myself properly. It might be CiboTap, it might be CiboTap. But yeah, they sort of always seem to be there or thereabouts with actually qualifying for stuff. But yeah, I think this year they've managed to bring in quite a few younger players. They've got more players playing abroad, which is handy because the Zant League isn't particularly good quality anymore. Like you say, all the players are aging there. That's literally the entire league is basically a retirement league, but they've been there all along. So yeah, I think they'll have a good shot of getting through this group. But after that, it could be anything really. They could easily be 4th, or they probably could scrape another trophy out of it. Like you say about the Copa Apollonia, it could be whichever way the wind blows is how this one ends up.
Yes, and quickly about Passio Coram, a team that again would be perhaps you would expect to qualify given the rest of the confederation, but like QQQ probably won't go any further. Would that be a fair assessment of them?
Yeah, it was a very fortunate group for them, wasn't it, in qualifying? 3 teams that have never really done anything of note football-wise to face off against when they have qualified for CiboTap before. I think, it was pretty much the run of the green for them just to get through. And now it's seeing if they can get some results against higher quality opposition and QQQ.
You say that obviously it was a fortunate group, but yet they still had the weakest record out of all of the group winners. So
exactly.
That's probably not the best sign.
I know Bajaro did do some work with their football league a couple of years ago, which I think elevated them to the ability to be able to qualify. But beyond that, there hasn't been a lot of work with them. And my call with the CCFA Confederation at the minute is I just think there's too many weak teams in it. There's not, I guess the WMFA has similar numbers, but at least there's a number of teams there that are quite competitive. Here, especially now with Bergischer leaving, you think Zandarine's got an aging squad. I know Calbion have came back, but Natopia as well, with the other teams leaving, it's sort of 3 decent teams, and none of them are really even in the bracket, I reckon, of being able to say, well, you could easily easily see them getting past the World Cup group stage. It's a very weak confederation, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, these things do come in waves, don't they? I mean, CTFA back in maybe like 2008, 2009 only had like 4 members. But then again, 2 of them were like, Alexandria and Natopia, who were at the time like, World Cup quarterfinals or more most years. But now you've got the larger numbers, the weaker teams. So yeah, it is something that comes in waves. And I think in maybe a couple of years' time, you'll see a stronger CTFA with maybe fewer members and a larger, say, like EMUFA with worse members. Like it just, chops and changes, doesn't it, really, with how nations come and go and grow their football and decline. It's interesting to see, to be fair.
Yeah, I think we'll quickly talk about Group B. 3 of these teams are leaving, as I said. Bergischer, 2019 World Cup hosts, reigning champions, but they're leaving Micras, so that will decrease their ability. Helderborg, or however you say it, similar situation, only they were never a good team in the first place. So they're going as well. North Antarctica are switching to EMUFA and becoming Castellona. So you would expect them and Bergischer to go through, but whether or not they can win the tournament, I think you look at that and you maybe think Natopia's Anderijn ahead of Castellona, or do you think that's me underplaying them a bit, Joe?
Again, it's one of those, I think North Antarctica are of the ageing squad situation as well. So maybe between them and Zanderijn, it could be actually an interesting, I don't know, maybe semi-final, or however, if they do happen to meet, it could be an interesting encounter. I wouldn't write off Bergischer at all. Like they're still going to be a strong team, even though there is the factor of them leaving. I think they'll still have a realistic challenge for winning the whole thing. Yeah.
And the other team in the group, and I'm sure Edwin will be delighted that we're talking about another one of his teams, if you're listening. Attorney, I think similar situation to QQQ, I think would be a fair descriptor.
Yeah, I mean, they have put more work into their football than QQQ have. So I don't think it's unjust that they have qualified, at least considering the group that they had in qualifying. But yeah, very much a team that I'm not sure if they were in the Emerging Nations Cup at one point, but they certainly seem like they should have been, because they were very bad when they first came along. But they have come on leaps and bounds with their domestic development. And they've got a lot of players who play in the Florian mainland, which is obviously pretty decent standard of league, even like their second tier. So yeah, it's a good rise, but I don't think they'll really challenge in that group.
Yeah, the team they remind me of is Jutlandia, because if you remember Jutlandia's squad, they had a number of players in, I think, the 3rd or 4th tier Oceanian football at one point, and a load of domestic players, but still were able to produce maybe not the best results, but still be competitive. And I think that maybe Attorney could go that way. Is that a prediction?
Yeah, I'd say so. At least like in like the CiboTap, I can't see them qualifying for World Cup like Jutlandia did. But yeah, I think they're even with a smaller format, I could still see them qualifying for a CiboTap regularly.
Well, you say that, but now the CTFA is about to lose 2 of its maybe top 4 teams. Someone else is going to have to become in the top 4. So why not them? I think they did win their group. It's not like they scraped through in the playoffs or anything. So they could well qualify for the next World Cup.
Exactly. I think, yeah, that's a very fair point. And I'm sure Edwin will be telling us how great Sturdy are when they do. I've just realised that we didn't talk about Natopia, so I'll briefly talk about them, and we can maybe bring Edgard. You're involved in Natopia,
yes.
So I guess we can go to you for another opinions. Again, Natopia, not a team that puts too much work into their sport. Although I know Harlian is working on the Natopian soccer side. He released a bunch of kits recently. Again, Natopia actually have a realistic chance of winning this one. So is that something that you think the Natopians are excited for? I know at the last World Cup, I posted a link in the Natopian Discord server to the game against Senya, and people seem to be excited about that. Do you think that it'll be the same again this year?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Harlian has been able to kind of wake people up to this being a part of the development of the country as a whole. And like, I know that maybe it's not very forward facing in the fact that like outsiders can see this, but a lot of the development work is happening in the Natopian only channel. And people to me seem excited. I'm excited about it. And and I have a quick question, and this might be like a little segue here. when do new nations join their regional federations? Like, for example, Calbion is going to come back, and I remember that they didn't do so well, or I'm sorry, that they did okay in 2016, last time they were around, right?
Yes, they did. I remember swimming that tournament, actually. Yes, they did very well. Teams will join the Confederation as soon as they join Micras.
Okay.
So they'll just be assigned based on which geographic area is closest to them. But I think it's always good to see nations, I guess, outside of the traditional football, soccer base getting excited about a tournament. So it's good to hear that the Natopians are looking forward to this tournament.
Yeah, I see Natopia as sort of Micras's USA when it comes to football. Like most of the time, no one really cares about it too much. But once it gets to a tournament and they've got a chance of like reaching the knockouts and maybe doing quite well, then interest definitely peaks. So yeah, I can sort of see that as a similarity there.
Okay, we'll go on now to the EMU Championships.
Well, can we just briefly mention the unofficial Micras World Championships as well, while we're on the seat?
Oh, okay, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, the unofficial ones.
Berkshire are the holders, and
Yes.
it could die with them.
Ooh, this is
Maybe they could take it home and then just
Or
take the ball
Victoria
home.
could take it off them in the first game.
Oh my God! If a turn
I'm not sure which is
to
worse.
the champions, I'm done with Micras. If that happens, I'm leaving.
Yeah, so where do we think that's going? Well, obviously it'll probably go to the winner of the whole thing. But if whoever holds it ends in the group stage or something, then who knows? Where do we think that's going to end up?
I think you're asking.
Briefly.
Yeah, I would say Natopia. I think I've got a sneaky suspicion they'll win it, but I wouldn't rule out. I think between Natopia or Zandarine to win it for me.
Yeah, and I still think Berkshire will get through the groups and take it with them. But after that, then it's all up for grabs.
I think it could be the case that they have it until the final.
Yeah, maybe.
But they do play North Antarctica, who could be a challenger for it. They do play, Vitoni and Helderberg, so anything could happen. You never know. But I'm sort of inclined to agree. I think Natopia are possibly slight favourites, but I could see Berkshire keeping it all the way.
I think it will be one of those three teams. It's just a case of how far Berkshire have fallen since leaving.
Well,
Yeah, because it was a while ago since they left, really. But obviously, with how the FMF works, they are still being kept on board until they finished all their matches.
And we have seen teams in the past that have already left do well. Like, for example, when after Alexandria left, they carried on performing well for the remainder of the competition they were in. So,
Are you still bitter they beat Mercury in that third place playoff?
no.
It's just Lissana Traore scoring a hat-trick again, wasn't it?
Oh dear. Okay, now we really should move on to the emus. Yes. I think we spent too much time talking about the CiboTaps. Group A, I'll just list the teams here. Sampantal, Nova England, Talonor, and Fimbella. Sampantal hosting this tournament, and Alperen's done I would say he's done a really good job since he joined Micras. What was it, a year ago? He's got several different teams, and usually what happens is someone will have a main nation that they focus on, and then maybe, like in my case with La Mancha, or bring through a second nation that's sort of an understudy. But he seems to be putting in a lot of work into all of his nations at once, and I think that's whether he can sustain it or not, but is another question. But at the moment, I would say it's pretty impressive. I've been impressed with his contributions to Micras.
Yeah, definitely.
And in terms of Sampantal, I know you look at that group and I think you say Nova England and Talonor to go through. But Sampantal, do you think they could challenge those two and get through?
I think definitely could do. Yeah, I think that again is a group where anyone could win it. I know Fimbella aren't the greatest of teams, but I know Nova England are no longer the greatest of teams either. So picking up a few points against them, or in fact, Fimbella finished above Passers in the group, who Passers have won it 3 times before. So
they did. That was
they're a bit of a force to be reckoned with. I would take them seriously as well. That's a tough group to call.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say Talonor to win it, but I could see Nova England. I could see Sampantal topping them. I could see Fimbella getting through that group. I don't think they would win it, but I think they could get through. As you said, I think it was 3-1 to Fimbella over Passas in that group. And Fimbella, I have to say, in that qualifying group, they lost 2 of their first 3 games. And then after that, they won every single qualifying game. And managed to win their group. So they've turned it around, especially since last year. Or maybe just Craitman didn't back them enough in his sims of the last World Cup qualifiers.
They've certainly become a lot more involved in Micras in the past year. When they first came along, they didn't really do anything. They just had their own little wiki and they had a claim, and they survived basically. Since they've joined in, they've gone pretty hardcore on the football. And that's definitely shown in how well they've done this year. I didn't expect them to qualify, but I'm not surprised that they did. It was Nuvaduts were kind of the other challengers in that group, weren't they? And they've definitely impressed me with their football more than I've bothered to do anything with Nuvaduts recently. So it wasn't a surprise that they challenged in that group at all. I don't think they'll do a huge amount here. Talonor, are probably my favourites to top the group, and then it'd be between Nova England and Sampantal for the other spot to go through. I think Nova England are very much on the wane. I mean, we talk about aging squads for Zanderine and other nations like that. Nova England is it's on a big dip. I think at the moment this may be their last chance at really playing at this sort of level for a few years, I think.
Yeah, they might be late for the kickoff if they're still collecting the pensions. So
very true. I think going back to Fimbella very briefly, I have to say in my FM file that I used to sim, I had their reputation was much lower than Nuvaduts and for Passas. I was genuinely shocked when that result came through the FM generator or whatever goes on behind the scenes of that game. That was a very big surprise. But they could continue to surprise, or maybe they will get found out at this tournament. But it's good. I think that's going to be a very interesting group and one to keep your eyes on. The other group in the tournament is Mercury, Passas, New Sussex, and Lost Islands. Joe, I think Mercury may be looking at this tournament and thinking, let's fill our boots here.
Well, you would hope so, but. Just this group, Passas are always a team that we've struggled against. I think trying to see how many times we've played them overall. I know it's about seven times, I think 7 or 8. I'm just trying to bring up the statistics now. Yeah, 7. We do tend to beat them more often than not, but again, it's that tournament thing. I think we've lost to them in big games before, so I would expect Mercury to get through at least to the semi-finals, but hopefully they would do that by winning the group. The other two teams, New Sussex and Lost Island, I think will probably struggle compared to the sort of two big guns. There's five championship titles between them. So I think it's going to be those two first and second, but in which order, I'm not sure.
Yes, because I think Lost Islands and New Sussex both gained from the fact that Jutlandia left halfway through qualifying, because otherwise you could have easily seen Jutlandia win that group. And I think Lost Island will just be happy to be there. New Sussex, I think, was it 0-0 both legs in their qualifying playoff?
Yes.
With Nova English Korea. Yeah. I was very surprised that Nova English Korea didn't manage to beat them. But Joe, you run both teams, so what did you think about that outcome?
Well, I think it was about what I was expecting, really. I think they are about as even as the scoreline suggested. They are both of a very similar standard, and I think the result was fair. 0-0. Having to resort to penalties for it was pretty much what I was expecting to happen, really. Maybe not quite to that extreme, but I knew it was going to be close.
Yes, well, I think it contrasted quite nicely with the other playoff, which I think was 8-6 on aggregate.
Yes. That's true.
So it complemented it quite nicely. But I think out of all these 4 tournaments, I think this is the one which I think has the most obvious champion. I would be very, very surprised if Mercury don't win this.
Yeah, I think it helps them that they've got Passas in the groups as well. If it is their sort of bogey team, they're meeting them in a knockout game. Like in the semis, I think it was maybe 2014. This might be a while ago now. That Passas beat Mercury in the semis or something like that, and that was a bit of a surprise. So that they're in the group means that they're probably, even if Passas do beat Mercury, then I can still see Mercury going through with 6 points. I'm not expecting them to drop anything at New Sussex or Lost Island. So I very much expect those two to be the two getting through to semi-finals. And then even whoever they meet, whichever order it is from Group A, I'd still think that Mercury and Passas is probably the final for this one.
I would have thought so, yeah. But again, Sampantal or Talonor or Nova England could do something as well. And if whoever wins that group can beat whoever comes second in Group B, then it's a surprise team in the final almost. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if Talnor got to the final, but I think Mercury should beat whoever they come up against. And then we'll talk about the last group, we'll talk about the last tournament, the Benacia Cup. Perhaps the most controversial build-up we've had to a major tournament on Micras. Batavia's recent history. I'm trying to think of a word that kindly describes it, but if we're going on football themes, I think messy might be the term to use. We had, I think, 5 teams threaten to boycott the tournament at some stage. Thankfully, there are no boycotts happening, which I think is a bit of a relief, because at one point it was looking like we might end up with the Iron Colts qualifying for the Benacia Cup, which would have been
the best chance of the Franklin Islands to ever make a tournament, I think.
Yeah.
Imagine qualifying and being in the Emerging Nations Cup in the same year. That'd be something.
Imagine qualifying having lost 62-0 in the qualifiers. If they'd been drawn in Group B as well in place of the unified governorates, that would have been something special. But alas not, and alas there are no boycotts, which means that we have the 8 strongest teams on the Benacian continent plus Craitman. You really snuck your way out of Apollonia with that one, I have to say. But Group A, Batavia, Shireoff, Elwyn and Casterburg. Casterburg threatens to become Lower Batavia. I think they're keeping the name now. But I actually think that's quite a tight group. Elwyn, I think, had a little bit of a dip and have sort of come back. Shireoff, since the Carillion fracture, I think they've gone downhill a little bit. Batavia, I don't know where to rate them, and the same with Casterburg. What do you guys think about that group?
Yeah, I mean, Elwyn and Shireoff sort of go back and forth over which one is the better of the two all the time. I mean, the last Benacia Cup final had Shireoff second place. The one before that had Elwyn winning it. And if we're going on sort of that sort of law, it should be Elwyn who were the better team this year. But yeah, Batavia were a very good team back in the day. I mean, they've been a runner-up in the Benacia Cup. They've reached multiple World Cup quarterfinals. They were always a very good team in terms of individual talent. I think they've had a few players in like the World Cup team of the tournament. They've always been very good until they had their little hiatus. Yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of them since they've come back. They've got a few results against Craitland in qualifiers. I think they've taken points off us a couple of times, which is a pretty good sign. So that I can easily see them challenging for this group, but it's such a tight one. It's very much between those 3. I can't see Casterburg being much of a thorn in any of the team's sides, but you never know.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're obviously looking at, when we were looking at the CiboTap, and Zanderheim being one of the stronger sides in there. Obviously, Batavia outdid Zanderheim in the Confederations Cup, so I think they can translate that form into this competition as well. I think that any one of, maybe not Casterburg, but I can easily see Casterburg coming third, and then one of the other 3 coming fourth. But I think it's going to be between 2 of those 3 as to who gets through. So 2 will get through. The other one I think will be last.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree, though. I think Casterburg do have the potential to nick some points in that group, but I agree, I don't see them getting through. But certainly they could nick a draw or 2, and that could really change who gets through. I think they open against Batavia, they end against Elwyn. So I think they could still have a big say in this tournament. And you never know, nick enough points and, only takes maybe a 1-0 win and a 0-0 draw, and suddenly they're through. So it's a very open group. But the other group, in terms Group B, I think this may be the strongest group that we've seen across all 4 tournaments, especially in terms of trophies won, with Craitland and Tellier in the same group. But you look at that, Craitland and Tellier in the same group, and I think there's a realistic chance that one of them's going home after that group phase. Sanoma have been very impressive since they've joined. They beat Senya in a friendly recently. They could really be a threat and a force to maybe even win this competition. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Sanoma beat Talnor a couple of days ago, and Talnor were a pretty consistent side in both World Cup and EMUs. So that's a bit of a statement, as well as the Senya win. I'm pretty worried about this group, I'll be honest. It's not often that, Craitland going into a tournament is not expected to get through. I think the last time we didn't was one of our very last EMU appearances, where we just kind of messed up against Nova English Korea, and that was kind of unexpected. Whereas this, I very much expect a challenge from. But to be fair, all 3 teams. Tellier beat us every other time we play them. we've yet to play Sanoma, but we've got them in a friendly before the finals here. So that would be a nice little gauge, but it also might be something to spur them on to beat us when it means something. And the Unified Governorates beat Telia, I think, maybe on penalties, but they definitely bettered them in the Vulture Cup last year after the Kalurian fracture. There's a lot of places we could slip up here, and I'm pretty worried we're not going to be able to. So yeah,
I think Craitman will be relieved the Unified Governorates first in the fixtures, just because it probably is it should be the easiest game. I don't know, maybe it won't necessarily end up being that way, but
it probably helps us that it's maybe not necessarily that game, but Telia versus Sanoma. If that ends up with a draw and we win, then that will be a good push forward for the rest of the group. But yeah.
There's a lot of places where you could slip up, and I think it may be a case of who can keep form going rather than like it could just be a case of if you avoid defeat in a few games, you're through, rather than a team that wins all the. I think it could be a case that a team could win this group on just 6 points. I think it could be a very tight group. And as you said, the Unified Governorates, no pushovers. I've seen Ardy's been putting a lot of work into them recently. He's established the league. I think he's in the league, did he not?
Did something recently, yeah.
Which is more than most nations. So
well, that's true. I think they're the team that got through via the playoffs. So that's the only reason I'm thinking that I don't want to write them off, but I think they probably are the weakest side. As I say, Craitman will be relieved to have them first, just because it's the best chance of getting off to a good start out of all of those teams.
And I think you'd rather be in the position of having points going into the final game against Sanoma than needing a win to stay in the tournament.
Definitely.
Which could very well be Sanoma's position by that stage.
Yeah, Sanoma could easily be the kingmakers in this group, couldn't they? That fixture.
And speaking more broadly about this tournament, who do you think is going to win it? Because I think realistically, I'm looking at this, I think maybe 6 teams could win this. Genuinely, it's a very wide open tournament.
I was looking at the same thing. Yeah, I think this is probably the most open-ended tournament I remember seeing ever.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot of excitement in terms of who could win this. I think I would hedge my bet with I don't know actually. I would say Craitland, but I might be wrong on that.
Yeah, I don't want to be biased and say Craitland, but I mean I think we're the highest ranked team in the tournament. If that's any sort of consolation to say, okay, fair enough, like that might be why we're favourites. But I mean, Batavia have definitely got home advantage here, especially with all the psychology that's gone behind, like the boycotts and stuff. That's kind of been the main thing that's been solid throughout, is that Batavia were going to host this. It just depended on who was going to join them. So yeah, I think they've got a good chance there. Elwyn always seemed to challenge. Shareth were runners-up last time and did well in the World Cup, actually. Pushed the Florian Republic in the playoff round right to penalties. And we talk about the Florian Republic as being one of the favourites for the Copa Apollonia. So if they're on that sort of standard still, then they've definitely got a chance. Telia will want to sort of avenge their dreadful World Cup appearance last year. Sanoma very much up and coming. It is just between any of those 6 teams. I could see a final of Sanoma versus Batavia. I could see it Craitman Telia. I'd not want to put any money on any of this, right, as opposed to maybe some other tournaments.
Yes, I think, well, if you compare the fact that QQQ and Attorney have qualified for the CiboTap Championships, I think it really does show the disparity between some of these confederations, because this is a very competitive tournament. And I said that 6 teams could win it. I mean, Kasseberg and the Unified Governorates are still very good teams, and it's going to be exciting to see how this one unfolds, because really it could go anywhere.
Yeah, if I had to, I don't even really want to answer the question, but if I had to pick just a name for who's going to win it, you might have to give me more than an hour to come up with one.
Yeah.
I think Elwyn have got a really good chance to build up some decent form with the group that they're in, and if they can carry that over into the knockout stages, they could go on and win the whole thing. They're not in the most difficult of groups. It's a closely matched group, but it's not the most difficult. And if they can get a good run going, they can probably carry it on. They've done it before.
That's very true. There's one thought that's just popped into my mind, which was at the last World Cup. I think Shirov beat Telia 6-2 or something like that.
Yeah.
That, I mean, if a score like that's not out of the realms of possibility, I mean, this is a very exciting tournament.
Well, I mean, we've got Batavia in here, I think, have been part of a 7-4 in a World Cup before. Yeah. Obviously, Craitland aren't averse to high scores. yeah, then we could have all sorts of scorelines here.
And I should just point out that provisionally, at least, I'm scheduled to sim this tournament. So it's 8-6 all over again. I'd like to see who Edgard thinks has a chance here, because he's a few steps removed from most of the teams here, I think.
In the Benacia Cup, I personally would root for either Sanama or the Unified Governorates, but I think that Craitman could have a good chance too. Then again, I don't really know the specific details. I just know that those are 3 teams of 3 countries that I pay attention to. So I know that I'll be paying attention to those teams.
Very nice. So if the Unified Governorates win, I think we can label Edgard as the predicting god of Micras.
He's going to be our Paul the Octopus, isn't he?
Yeah. I think we're done then. That's all 8 teams. Actually, we should all, well, we can cut this out, I guess, but maybe we should predict, all 4 of us go around and say who we think is going to win each tournament. It's sort of just as sort of a closing remark.
Big question.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go first. So my predictions for who's going to win each tournament, I'd say Copa Apollonia. I've got to say Senya, haven't I? Really? I've got to back myself. CiboTap, I'll go Natopia. Emus, I'll go Mercury, and then I don't want to say. I'm going to change my mind. I'm not going to say Craitland. I'm going to say Sanama to win the Benacia Cup. What about you guys?
Go on, Joe.
I'm trying to work it out. Yeah, I think Copa Apollonia, I can see maybe an Alduria and Senya final, and possibly Senya. I would imagine Senya would probably win, but I'll say Senya if I have to pick one. CiboTap, I still think Berkshire are in with a very good chance. I'm going to stick with them. Emus, obviously Mercury have to keep up their run of appearing in the Confederations Cup one way or the other. So if we don't win it, then we're going to host it next time. I would imagine Mercury should win it, but I can see Passus also doing it, and maybe Talonor doing well too. But I'll say Mercury. And then Benacia Cup, I'm going to stick with Elwyn.
Craitman, who are your 4 champions?
I think just on a little bit of form, at least in tournament finals, I'm going to go Coria for the Copa Apollonia. I've got a bit of a dark horse feeling about them. CiboTap, I think, probably Natopia. I think Berkshire is probably, sort of too dead to really challenge here. At least, well, I'd hope so anyway. I think Natopia probably get that one. Emus is Mercury's to give away, to be fair. I can't see anyone really realistically challenging them. And the Benacia Cup, I will go with, it may be some bias, but not for the team you think of, and I'll go with Telia. They've got a bit of a point to prove after last year, so I think if any team's good at coming back and doing well, it's definitely the Telians.
Fair play. And I guess Edgard, the predicting god of Micras.
Man, like you guys are hyping me up, and then like I can just see this like just being a disaster. Like every single that I made just like never materializes.
So long as you don't say Serbo-Zemska, Attorney, Finn Bella, and Kasterberg, I think you should be fine.
Okay, so for Copa Apollonia, I think I am also going to go with Senya, although I have my partial attachment to Alduria, but I think definitely in the Copa Apollonia, Senya is the team to watch. CiboTap, Natopia. Like that is Alexandria's old stomping grounds. And I think that Natopia is, of course, like pretty well positioned to win that. For the EMU, I think I'm going to go with Mercury. I don't really know anything about the other teams except Nova England, but I think they've been, well, I'm not sure now, but it doesn't seem like they're the team that they used to be. So I'll go with Mercury, and for Benacia Cup, I will go with the Unified Governorates.
Okay,
they've got at least one fan rooting for them.
There we go. Yeah.
Have they got a gun to your head?
Yeah, like I don't have the camera turned on, so you guys can't see the UGB. Yeah, the UGB agent holding a revolver to my head.
Well, I think that completes the FMF side of things. We're going to do the what people have been up to recently.
Yeah. I just love to do those little rounds where people can pitch us and let us know on what's going on in their nation. You never know who's looking for another nation to join. So that's why I always like to include it at the end. If someone would like to start us off, how about you, Barnaby?
Well, obviously, we've just had the elections in Senya, which the first time I've actually tried simming an election. So first of all, I did some census data because I think the last time I did a census for Senya, it was when we still had Fort Colgrad and the original Senyan territories, which were really small. So I did some new census data, and then based off that, I did a sort of PR style election. So we've got 10 parties that are going to be represented in the National Democratic Forum, NDF. So we've got 10 parties. I guess the next step will be trying to see which ones are going to form the coalition to become the government. The National Party and the Centrist Party held the government last time out, but they don't have enough seats between them to make a coalition. So either they're going to have to add to that, or maybe the Conservatives can put a coalition together. But the real power breakers might be the Northern Senyan League because they won a lot of seats, but they're not really the party that people want to sort of be allying with, because they've got a bit more of a regionalist policy, and they kind of want a bit more freedom for Northern Senya. So I think the other parties don't really want that and will push back against it. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Okay. And Craitman, how about you?
Well, Craitland's pretty quiet at the moment. So my focus is kind of going to be on my new nation, which recently got accepted to Micras, and that's West Skerry and Sri Pashana.
Yay!
It's a sort of Indo-Caribbean flavour of a nation. I tried to backstory in sort of the New Britannic colonial empire, had a lot of territory in the Skerry Isles, also had an Indian-themed peninsula around the same sort of time. So I was thinking, okay, there's a bit of colonialism, probably a little bit of moving people around, let's say. So yeah, I've tried to bring a real life culture into Micras through a similar sort of means, basically. So yeah, we've got the native Skerries, who I think are called the Dromoska. I don't know how to pronounce it properly, but yeah, they're basically they're a black people, and the Guwahati, who were the New Britannic's Indian territory, are the sort of Indian themed influence there. So I've gone for a bit of a combo there, and it's basically my vehicle for doing more elections and running more government sims and trying to use the Norton calendar a little bit more. So we've got 3 legislative elections in August, which I need to really put some work into. But then every sort of 3 months, we'll either have an executive election or a legislative election, and that will keep it going quite regularly and keep my interest in it there. So that's what I'm hoping to do with that. There's a lot of culture to flesh out and a lot of things that I want to look at. Obviously, being a combination of Caribbean and Indian nations, there's not going to be much of a football link there, but cricket is going to be what I'm going to look at sporting-wise there. So at least that's something slightly different to focus on. And I'm going to work on a cricket World Cup, which will go towards the Micras Games. I'm hoping to start that up later tonight, actually, and that'll be running through July. So yeah, that's my focus rather than Craitland for a change. That's what I'm going to be looking at.
Okay, that's awesome. And Joe, how about you?
Yeah, I was going to say, and in the next episode, Craitman pronounces place names from... So yeah, we've just had a couple of recent expansions in Mercury. The first one, obviously, because there was the volcanoes in North Antarctica, which is why we sort of relocated all of the Antarctic territories to the Northern Hemisphere. So that was all accepted, and that's how sort of Castellona came about, and Kavakakanikaktak moved up north, and Lusa have moved into the ocean near to the Franklin Islands. Then we also had another expansion because we've resurrected an old idea. It was originally 2011, been a bit of a collaboration with Elwyn, or specifically Normark, to start constructing the Trans-Keltian Railway.
Mm-hmm.
So we're sort of building the northern section of the railway between Mercury and Normark at the minute.
Cheers, I did.
The idea actually originally was proposed. I've just been looking. It was the 20th of September 2011.
Yeah.
So I think it would be very, very nice if we could come full circle and actually open the line 10 years on from when it was originally suggested. So
I think
that Northern Rail.
It was a
yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just think that just shows commitment to realism about how these projects just take forever to happen.
Yes, we've got there's a very stubborn old man who refuses to move his house, so we're dealing with that at the moment.
Oh man. All right. Okay. And oh yeah, it's just me now. So I merged Alduria and the Wechua Nation into their own federation. Yay. I just wanted to consolidate projects, and the Wechua and the Eldurians have always been very close. So I figured that would be the easy way there. And they're also very close to each other. I just thought that that's what would make the most sense. But basically, I'm just trying to build a happy little home for all of my little creations, all my little peoples. And in a way, kind of trying to scratch an itch to bring back some elements of Alexandria, which was, I'm so excited to have that purple color back. I don't know why I'm so attached to it, but I am so happy I have that now.
It'd be like Shiroth not being red. That is your color now. You're like, no one else can have it.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm just trying to kind of rekindle a spark of creativity, and the merger in my head right now, there's a lot of pieces moving around, and I'm just trying to empty what I have in my head onto the wiki or onto Word documents or notes that I'm making. But it feels like it's a really big undertaking trying to tie in all of these disparate groups, because in Alduria, you have the Alexandrians and the Capuchins, and they together form what are called the Aldurian. And then you have the Bapkis, then you have Irani, then you have the Constancians, the Ladinos. So there's a lot of little groups, and that's just Alduria. Then you look at the Wechus, and they're all Wechuing, and that's just always weird to marry together. But I'm figuring it out, and I'm having a blast.
I mean, there's a lot of links there, isn't it? Because Alexandria had quite a few Celtian territories quite near to where Wechua is. So there's definitely a lot of ties there where you could say, yeah, all the Alexandrians want to kind of work together a little bit now.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll see how that pans out. I hope that I hope to get some really good development going in the wiki so that I can maybe reestablish some of those territories in the future. Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming on, and thank you, Barnaby, for being such a wonderful and a gracious host. This was fun to be part of.
Cheers. I didn't say anything that can get me cancelled, so that's a success in my book.
I mean, if anyone manages to walk out of these MicrasCast episodes unscathed, I take that as a victory.
Yes. Brilliant. No, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was really enjoyable to do this. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and we'll have to do it more. We'll do more.
Definitely.